Call me a storyteller. I've lived 100 years, and I've watched revenge evolve. It went from a gunslinger's duel to the cold-blooded murder of a single tweet, but the core truth never changes. The best revenge isn't a bullet, it's the truth. The truth, sharpened and served at just the right moment, can shatter an empire. You want a story, I'll give you the structure. A story about that truth. The phone shattered the silence at 2 in the morning. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 48 years old. For 25 of those years, I was a senior fraud investigator at Axiom Global Consulting. My job was not just to look at spreadsheets, it was to find the rot beneath the polish. I can smell a lie like some people smell rain. The numbers, the body language, the precise way a man's voice tightens when he's hiding a decimal point. They all talk to me. This call, however, was not professional. This was blood. The voice on the other end was a ghost, a whisper. Mom. It was my daughter, Chloe, 24 years old. Chloe, what's wrong? Mom, he hit me. The words were small, broken pieces of glass. A bitter, metallic taste flooded my mouth. Marcus. He said I attacked him. I sat up in bed, the cold air of the Denver night hitting my skin. I was already calculating. Where are you? The police. They're here. There was a shuffling sound, a sob she tried to swallow. Mom, they believe him. They took my phone. The line went dead. I did not ask any more questions. I did not panic. Panic is a luxury for people who have time, for people who aren't facing a tactical problem. My brain, which had been idling in sleep, shifted instantly into crisis analysis. I was out of bed, pulling on the heavy wool coat I kept by the door, sliding my bare feet into driving shoes. I did not waste time on socks or a bra. Those were comforts. This was a war. The streets of Denver were empty, blue and silver under the streetlights. My headlights cut through the quiet of a sleeping city. I drove toward the Cherry Creek police station. I did not speed. I did not run the one red light I encountered. My hands were steady on the wheel. I did not feel fear, not the paralyzing kind. What I felt was a cold, deadly focus, a chill that settled in my spine and sharpened my vision. This was work, just a different kind of balance sheet, one measured in flesh instead of dollars. My mind went to Marcus Thorne, 27 years old, the boy genius, the charismatic founder of a tech startup that had charmed Chloe, charmed all her friends, charmed every investor in the state, everyone but me. I remembered looking at his initial funding proposal 2 years ago, a favor for Chloe, who wanted my approval so badly. The numbers were too clean, the projections too perfect. Liars who use words are amateurs, the true sociopaths, the professionals. They lie with numbers. They create a spreadsheet so beautiful, so clean. You forget to ask what bodies are buried in the rounding errors. Marcus's financials were a masterpiece of fiction. I told Chloe to be careful. She told me I was being cynical. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the station. The air hit me instantly. Not fresh air. The stale, 24-hour-a-day smell of old coffee, industrial disinfectant, and quiet desperation. It was a smell I knew well from my old life, from depositions that ran into the night. A young officer sat at the front desk, his face pale and tired under the harsh fluorescent lights. Riley, his name tag read. He was staring at a computer screen, trying to look busy. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice bored, not looking up. "I'm here for Chloe Thorne." He looked up. His eyes scanned my face, my expensive coat thrown over pajamas, my bare ankles, and he paled. I recognized that look. I had seen it 100 times in corporate boardrooms when I walked in unannounced. The man on the other side of the table suddenly realizing his carefully constructed world was about to be dismantled. It was not the recognition of a concerned citizen. It was the recognition of a problem. It was the look of a man who knew he was in the middle of something he was not equipped to handle, and the person who could handle it had just arrived. I stood in front of the high desk, letting the silence stretch, letting him feel the weight of it. I did not raise my voice. I did not have to. My voice was clear, low, and carried no trace of a tremor. I am here for my daughter, Chloe Thorne, and you will explain to me exactly what is happening. Officer Riley's mouth opened and closed. A fish pulled into the dry air of a problem he wanted no part of. He looked from me to the hallway behind him, stammering, "Ma'am, it's an active investigation. You'll have to wait." "I'll take this. Riley." The new voice cut through the stale air with a thick, practiced confidence. It was a voice that was used to owning every room it entered. Detective Kincaid emerged from the hallway. He was a large man, his suit jacket straining slightly over a gut he'd earned from steak dinners paid for by other people. He carried himself with the specific, unearned arrogance of a mid-level gatekeeper who thinks he's a king. He was all smirks and cheap cologne. He looked at me, taking in my disheveled state, and his lips curled in a smile of pure condescension. "Mrs. Vance," he said, like he was greeting a difficult tenant, not a concerned mother. "Your daughter has had a pretty rough night. Seems she decided to attack her husband with a knife." He let the words hang in the air. A guilty verdict delivered before any trial. I ignored the accusation completely. It was noise. It was a negotiating tactic meant to put me on the defensive. I did not move. I did not blink. I simply read the data in front of me. The expensive watch, the silk tie, the way he stood with his weight back on his heels, a posture of absolute, unshakable smugness. "Detective Kincaid," I said. My voice was as flat and cold as a marble slab. "What a surprise to see you here. I thought you were assigned to the white-collar division. I had no idea you were handling domestic calls these days. I thought high-tech fraud was your specialty." This was the twist. This was the variable he never saw coming. Kincaid's smirk faltered. It was a micro-expression, a flicker of the eyes, a sudden tightening of the jaw. But to me, it was a full confession printed in a 12-point font. He froze. He had not expected to be recognized in his own station, in the middle of the night, by the mother of a suspect. I knew exactly who Kincaid was. 2 years ago, Axiom had been hired to do a deep financial audit on a venture capital firm, Apex Holdings. They were considering a merger. My job was to find out if they were lying about their assets. They were, but in the process, I had traced the investments of every single one of their partners. One of those partners was Marcus Thorne's new tech company, and one of the minority stakeholders in that same tech company, hidden behind a shell LLC that took me about 4 hours to crack, was Detective Kincaid. This was not an investigation. This was a cover-up. This was asset protection. "This is a simple domestic violence case, ma'am," Kincaid said, recovering. But the confidence had been replaced by a brittle defensiveness. He had switched from offense to defense. "There is nothing simple," I replied, my voice sharp enough to cut. "When the arresting officer is a personal investor in the alleged victim's company, how does that look on a report?" Riley took an involuntary step back. His eyes were wide. He was the auditor, the junior associate, watching the senior partner get caught. Kincaid's face darkened from smug to furious. He had lost control of the narrative, and he knew it. He turned on Riley, his voice a low growl. "Riley, take Mrs. Vance to the waiting room. Now." He turned back to me. "Your daughter is being held for questioning. She is a danger to her husband and herself. You are not to see her." "No." Kincaid laughed, a short, ugly bark. "No, that's not how this works. I just gave an order." "And I am informing you of the law," I said. I cited the Colorado statute, chapter and verse, the one that guarantees an individual in custody the right to see family within a reasonable time frame, especially when not yet formally charged. I knew it because I made it my business to know the rules better than the people who enforce them. It is the only way to beat them. Kincaid realized his mistake. He had tried to bully me with his authority, but I had just countered with actual law. He was a man holding a club, and I had just shown up with a scalpel. He could not win this fight. Not in front of his subordinate. Not without crossing a line that would create a paper trail. He stared at me, his eyes filled with a new, personal hatred. This was no longer just business for him. I had made him look small. 5 minutes, he spat, his voice laced with venom. And she stays in the interrogation room. 5 minutes. He jabbed a thick finger at Riley. Go! Officer Riley walked like a man on eggshells. He led me down a short, beige hallway to a room that smelled of dried sweat and regret. He pointed at the door. 5 minutes, he whispered, as if Kincaid could hear him. Then he disappeared back to the safety of his desk. I pushed the door open. The room was a small, windowless box, painted a sickly pale green. Chloe was sitting on a hard plastic chair at a small metal table. She looked impossibly small, a child lost in a supermarket. Her expensive silk blouse, the one I had bought her for her 24th birthday, was torn at the shoulder. Her hair was matted on one side, damp with tears. She was hugging herself, rocking almost imperceptibly, staring at the scarred tabletop as if it held the answers to the universe. She didn't look up when the door opened. "Chloe," I said. Her head snapped up. Her eyes, my eyes, were wide and hollow. When she saw me, the fragile wall she had built around herself shattered. A raw, guttural sob tore out of her. "Mom, oh God, Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I crossed the room in 2 strides, my brain shutting down the investigator and letting the mother take over. I pulled her up from the chair and into my arms. She collapsed against me, shaking violently, her hands clutching at the back of my coat. I could feel the sharp, acrid smell of fear coming off her in waves, a scent more potent than any perfume. I held her, rocking her, my mind a blank wall of white-hot rage. "It's okay," I murmured, the words automatic. "I'm here. I have you. It's okay." But as I held her, my hand on her arm, I felt something. It was not just the trembling. It was something wrong, a stiffness under the fabric of her torn blouse. I pulled back, holding her by the shoulders. "Let me see you." "Mom, don't!" She started, trying to pull away, a fresh wave of shame washing over her face. I was not asking. I gently took her left arm. She winced. I pushed the sleeve of the torn blouse up past her elbow, and there it was, the evidence. It was a fresh bruise, an angry purple and red blossom of violence on her upper arm, shaped distinctly like 4 fingers and a thumb, a grip, a violent one, but that was not what made my blood turn to ice. Beneath that fresh, swollen mark, barely visible, was a constellation of older injuries, a sickly, yellowish-green cluster of fading bruises, a history, a timeline of violence written on her skin. This was not a single, terrible night. This was a pattern. This was weeks, maybe months. My training, my analytical mind took over again, merging with the maternal rage. I was no longer just a mother. I was an investigator, and this was my case. "This is not the first time," I said. It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. Chloe's face crumpled. She tore her arm away, hiding the evidence, as if she could hide the truth from me. I didn't want you to think I failed," she whispered, the tears streaming down her face again. "You're always so strong, Mom. You fix everything. I thought I could handle him. I thought he would stop." "He took my phone," she said, her voice suddenly sharp, the fear replaced by a flicker of her old self. "That's why he did this tonight. He found out." "Found out what?" I asked, keeping my voice low and calm. I recorded him. "Tonight, he was saying all of it. How he was going to ruin me, how he was going to take the money. I recorded it all." Mom. He saw the red light on the phone. He knew. She looked up at me, her eyes desperate. He took it. He has it. They'll delete it. That's the only proof I have. I took her face in my hands. I made her look at me, made her see the absolute certainty in my eyes. The cold focus was back. The game had changed. This was not just a domestic dispute. This was evidence tampering, conspiracy, and a web of lies. And they had made the fatal mistake of involving my daughter. Chloe, listen to me, I said, my voice quiet and hard as steel. They can take the phone. They can break it. They can delete the files. I brushed the matted hair from her face. But they didn't take my brain. I left Chloe in the small green room. The image of those fading bruises burned onto my retinas. The mother in me wanted to stay, to hold her, to shield her. But the investigator, the part of me that was now fully awake and running the operation, knew that comfort was not the objective. Justice was. And justice required me to leave that room and re-enter the battlefield. I walked back into the main lobby. The atmosphere had changed. A paramedic was now present, a young woman with a large orange bag. And at the center of this staged drama was Marcus Thorne. He was the perfect victim. It was a performance, and I had to admit, he was a master. He was sitting on a bench, his head in his hands, while the paramedic carefully applied a sterile bandage to his left forearm. His shirt, an offensively expensive Egyptian cotton, was torn. But it was torn in a deliberate, aesthetically pleasing way, just at the shoulder, as if in a struggle, but not so much as to be unweariable. The cut on his arm was shallow, clean, and in a location that was easily accessible to one's own right hand. It was a wound designed to be seen, not to be debilitating. This was Marcus in his element. He was not a man, he was a pitch deck. Every gesture was curated, every word was market-tested. He was selling a product, the product of his innocence, his suffering, and Detective Kincaid was his prize investor, nodding along, buying every lie. Then, Marcus looked up, as if sensing my presence. He timed it perfectly, just as the paramedic was taping the bandage down. He made eye contact with me, and his face contorted into a mask of profound, practiced sorrow. "Eleanor," he said, his voice cracking just the right amount. He even stood up, wincing slightly as he put weight on his leg. "Thank God, you're here." He took a step toward me, but Kincaid put a hand on his chest. "Take it easy, son." Marcus looked at me, his eyes wide and pleading. "Eleanor, Chloe, she's not stable. She's not herself. She just lost control." He turned to Kincaid, the humble, terrified victim reporting to the strong protector. "It was just like I told you, Detective," Marcus said, his voice trembling. "She started accusing me, getting jealous. I tried to calm her down, but she just snapped. She started breaking things, throwing things. I didn't know what to do." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "Then she went to the kitchen. She grabbed a knife. Eleanor, a big one. She came at me. I just put my arm up. I was just trying to defend myself. It was a beautiful story. Clean. Simple. It had a clear victim, a clear villain, and a motive female hysteria that men like Kincaid had been accepting as fact for centuries." Kincaid nodded, his face a mask of solemn understanding. "We appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Thorne. And there's more," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He pulled his own phone from his pocket, his hand visibly shaking. I was scared. She's done this before, the yelling, but never this bad. I had to record it, for my own protection, in case something like this happened." He handed the phone to Kincaid. Kincaid, holding it like it was the key to the whole case, turned the screen so he and Marcus could see it. He pressed play. There was the twist. The video was short, maybe 15 seconds. But it was brutal. It was Chloe, my Chloe. Her face contorted in rage, her voice raw from screaming. The audio was clear. I hate you, I hate you. And then, with all her strength, she hurled a heavy blue ceramic vase against the wall, where it exploded into 1,000 pieces. The video cut out. Kincaid let out a low whistle. He looked at the phone, then at me, then back at the phone. "Well," he said, handing the phone back to Marcus. "That looks pretty clear-cut to me. We have the video of her violent state. We have the weapon, which we recovered from the kitchen floor, and we have the victim's wound." He crossed his arms, satisfied. The case was closed. Marcus pocketed his phone. He looked at me, and this time, the mask of sorrow was gone, replaced by something else. It was a smile, a tiny, almost imperceptible lift at the corner of his mouth. It was the smirk of a sociopath who has just closed a funding round, the look of a man who had not only won, but had enjoyed the victory. He thought he had presented a perfect, unassailable report. I remained silent, watching him. I had not reacted to the video of my daughter's breakdown. I was not watching the content. I was watching the presentation. And like any good investigator, I knew the most important information was never in the story itself. It was in the margins. It was in the data. I let the silence hang for a beat, letting him enjoy his win. I let Kincaid savor his closed case. Then, I spoke. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the air and landed with the weight of a gavel. "What time was that video taken?" "Marcus." My question hung in the air, simple, direct, and utterly unexpected. The entire station, from Kincaid to the paramedic, had been focused on the emotional content of the video. I was focused on the container. Marcus's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of confusion. He was a performer who had just been asked an unscripted question. I don't know," he stammered, the smooth, victim-like tremor in his voice now sounding thin and uncertain. "About half an hour ago, just before she grabbed the knife." Kincaid, sensing a change in the room's power dynamic, immediately stepped in. He waved a dismissive hand, playing the role of the annoyed, overworked detective. "That doesn't matter, Mrs. Vance. We have what we need. You're just trying to distract." "It matters very much," I interrupted, my voice slicing through his. I did not look at Kincaid. I kept my eyes locked on Marcus. The first rule of interrogation is to isolate your subject. Kincaid was just noise, a bodyguard for the lie. Marcus was the source. "Let's be precise. Marcus," I said, my voice low and methodical, the way I would speak to a junior analyst. "Your testimony is that Chloe became enraged. She threw the vase. She then escalated, grabbing a knife from the kitchen, and she attacked you. You defended yourself. You were wounded. And then you called 911 for help. Is that the correct sequence of events?" Marcus glanced at Kincaid, a quick, nervous tick. He was looking for his protector. Kincaid gave a slight, confident nod. Marcus turned back to me, his confidence returning, but it was brittle now. "Yes, that's exactly what happened." "I see." I turned my body, slowly, deliberately, away from Marcus and Kincaid. I faced the young officer at the front desk. "Officer Riley?" Riley, who had been watching this exchange like a tennis match, flinched. "Ma'am, you are at the dispatch terminal. You have the official log of this incident." I did not ask him. I told him. "What time was the 911 call from Marcus Thorne received and logged?" Kincaid took a step forward. "Officer, you don't need to answer." "He does," I said, still looking at Riley. "It is a matter of public record, and it is material to an active investigation. Or would you prefer I file a formal request in the morning?" Citing Detective Kincaid's obstruction, Riley's Adam's apple bobbed. He was a young cop caught between a corrupt detective and a woman who clearly knew how to make his life hell. He chose the path of least immediate resistance. He looked at his screen, his fingers clicking on the keyboard. He refused to look at Kincaid. The call. The 911 call was logged at 2:04 a.m., ma'am. 2:04 a.m., I repeated, letting the time settle in the air. I turned back to Kincaid. Detective, I need to see that video again. Absolutely not, Kincaid snapped. Detective, that video is now evidence in a crime you are investigating. Refusing to review it, or hiding it from an involved party, could be seen as spoliation. But, if you prefer, I can just tell you what it said. I looked back at Marcus, whose face had become pale, a sheen of sweat visible on his forehead under the harsh lights. You don't need to, I said. I'll tell you. The timestamp on that video file, the one you played, was 2:01 a.m. Kincaid's face was blank. He was a bully, not a strategist. He didn't see the trap. I laid it out for him, my voice clear and patient, as if explaining a complex financial model to a very, very stupid board member. This video, I said, pointing at Marcus's phone, was taken at 2:01 in the morning. I turned to Kincaid. The emergency call, according to your own official log, was placed at 2:04 in the morning. I paused. I let the numbers sink in. 3 minutes. A gap of 3 minutes. I turned back to Marcus. His breathing was shallow. He was no longer a performer. He was just a bad liar in an expensive shirt. Your story, Marcus, is that Chloe threw the vase, then she attacked you with the knife, and then you called for help. The vase was the beginning. The stabbing was the middle. The call was the end. I took a step closer to him, lowering my voice. So why is the timeline inverted? Why was this video of her losing control filmed after you claim she had already stabbed you? Or, let me propose an alternative theory. Perhaps the stabbing happened before the video. Perhaps you stabbed yourself first, as a prelude to set the stage for the call you were about to make. The air in the station was thick and silent. The paramedic had stopped packing her bag. Riley was frozen, staring. Kincaid's face was a mask of confusion and anger, and Marcus was sweating. He was visibly, profusely sweating. The perfect report, the clean narrative he had presented, had a fatal 3-minute hole in it, and I had just driven a truck through it. Kincaid, for the first time, looked truly cornered. He was a man who had lost the script. He scrambled, his voice bluffing. Timestamps can be wrong. Digital glitch. It means nothing. Or, I said, my voice cutting him off, the entire testimony is a fabrication. The entire foundation of your case is a lie. I turned to Riley, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. I am going to speak to my daughter again, and this time I'm calling her lawyer. I suggest you find a room that is not this lobby. The word lawyer did what I intended it to do. It invoked a process, a paper trail, and a level of scrutiny that Kincaid clearly was not prepared for. He wanted this wrapped up in the dark, before the sun rose. I was now threatening to drag his shoddy, corrupt investigation into the full light of day. He didn't argue. He just jerked his head toward the hallway, a silent, furious concession. I walked back into the small green room. Chloe looked up, her eyes wide with a desperate, fragile hope. She had heard the change in tone from the hallway. Mom, what? What's happening? The timeline, I said, closing the door. His video, it doesn't add up. Tell me what really happened. Chloe's breath hitched, and the story poured out of her, a confession of his sins, not hers. That video, she started, her voice trembling with a new kind of anger. It wasn't the fight. It was the reason. He was goading me. He was trying to make me. She looked at her hands, her voice dropping to a whisper, and I was suddenly in the living room with her. For nearly an hour, she said. Marcus had been on her, not yelling, not hitting. Worse, he was using a cold, precise cruelty. He told her she was a failure. He told her she was a drain on his finances, his energy. And then he used his trump card. Me. He just kept saying, That you knew I was a disappointment, Chloe whispered, and a fresh tear traced a path down her cheek. That you were this brilliant, strong investigator, and I was just weak. A stupid girl who couldn't even keep a husband happy. He had paced the room, his voice calm, rational, and utterly toxic, dismantling her piece by piece. She had been screaming, crying, telling him to stop. And that is when he smiled. He had pulled his phone from his pocket, his thumb activating the camera. The small red light came on. Do it. Marcus had taunted her, holding the phone up. Go on. Go crazy. Show your mom who you really are. Let's get a good one for her. Show her the real Chloe. He kept repeating it. Do it. Do it. Show me the crazy. I couldn't. I saw red, Chloe stammered, reliving it. I saw that vase, the one you gave me, and I threw it. I wanted him to shut up. Just as the video had shown, the vase exploded. And in the silence that followed, Marcus had calmly pressed the stop button on his phone. He had looked at the footage, checked it. Then he looked up at her, his face devoid of any emotion except satisfaction. Thank you, he had said, his voice perfectly normal. That's perfect. Now I have proof you're insane. Now everyone will believe me. That was when the cold dread had hit Chloe. She realized this was not a fight. This was an execution. She had turned to leave, to pack a bag, to get to me. But Marcus had moved, blocking the bedroom door. The real assault, the one he had been planning, began. He had grabbed her, throwing her back onto the sofa. And that's when Chloe, my daughter, had tried to be smart. While he was ranting, while he was grabbing her arm, leaving the bruises I had seen, she had managed to get her own phone out of her back pocket. She fumbled with it, her fingers shaking, and she had hit the audio recorder. I thought I could get him, she cried. I thought I could record him. But he had seen it. He had seen the screen of her phone light up. His eyes had gone from cold anger to a sudden, wild panic. He knew what he had said. He knew what he was doing. He grabbed my phone, she choked out. He snatched it right out of my hand. He looked at me, Mom, and he said, I will make sure no one ever believes you. And then he hit me, and he took the knife from the kitchen block. And I held up my hand. I know. I stood up, the final piece of the ledger clicking into place. My mind was racing, analyzing this new, critical data. Chloe thought the evidence was gone because Marcus had her phone. Kincaid thought the evidence was irrelevant because he had Marcus's video. But I knew something they didn't. This was not just about a physical phone. This was about a data trail. And Marcus and Kincaid were not just concealing evidence. They were in the process of actively, digitally, and illegally destroying it. Right now. I walked out of that green room with a purpose. The investigator was back in control, the mother's rage channeled into a cold, hard point. I crossed the lobby. Kincaid and Marcus were standing near the paramedic, who was packing her bag. They were speaking in low tones, a conspiracy of whispers, their story being aligned, the lies setting like concrete. I did not stop. I walked directly to Kincaid. Where is my daughter's phone, detective? Kincaid looked at me, his face a mask of professional boredom. He was a bad actor. Like I told you, Mrs. Vance, it's an active investigation. We have not located her phone at this time. A perfect, sterile lie. He didn't blink. He didn't fidget. He was a practiced liar, but he was lying to the wrong person. I knew he was lying. I knew Marcus had that phone, or had given it to Kincaid. They were partners, and they were burying the truth. I did not have time to argue with him. I had to assume the evidence was being destroyed right now. I turned away from him, scanning the room. My eyes landed on Officer Riley, still at his desk, still trying to look anywhere but at me or his superior. He was the weak point. He was the crack in the wall. Officer Riley, I said, my voice sharp and loud enough to cut through the lobby. He visibly flinched. "Ma'am, I need a computer, one with an internet connection. I need it right now." "Ma'am, I can't," he stammered, his eyes flicking nervously toward Kincaid. "This is police property. I'm not authorized." "You are authorized to assist in the preservation of evidence in a felony assault," I said, walking toward his desk, "or you can be an accessory to its destruction. Your detective is currently engaged in evidence tampering. I'm offering you a choice. I need a terminal. Now." The color drained from Riley's face. He was a young man caught between a career-ending decision and a corrupt boss. He was terrified of Kincaid, but in that moment, he was more terrified of me. He looked at Kincaid, who was now watching, his face tight with anger. Riley swallowed hard. He didn't say a word. He just gave a tiny, almost invisible nod toward the corner of the room. There, in the shadow, was an old, beige-colored desktop terminal. It looked like it was for public information or filing minor reports. It was on. It was my way in. I walked to it. I sat down. The chair was hard plastic. The keyboard was ancient. The letters worn away. I opened the browser. My fingers moved with a speed that defied the hour. This was not a physical chase. It was a digital one. It was a race against the delete key. I went to Chloe's cloud storage provider. I had set up the account for her years ago when she first went to college. I knew the login. I knew the password. She thought I was being a controlling mother. I was being a prepared one. I typed in her credentials. I was in. My heart hammered against my ribs. I navigated to the directory labeled Audio Backups. I clicked. The screen loaded. "This folder is empty." A cold spike of fear. Had I been wrong? Had she not set up the autosync? No. An empty folder is not a dead end. It is a sign of action. I am an investigator. I do not look at what is there. I look at what has been done. My eyes scanned the interface, past the empty folders. I found the link. Settings. I clicked. Then account history. And then activity log. The screen populated with a new list. A list of digital footprints. And there it was. Twist number 5. Login detected from IP address 192.168.1.10. Time 2:27 a.m. File rec021.ent4a deleted. Time 2:28 a.m. File rec0209.m4a deleted. Time 2:28 a.m. File rec0207.m4a deleted. Time 2:28 a.m. My blood turned to ice. 2:27 a.m. That was less than 10 minutes ago. They were doing it. Right now. In this building. Marcus, or Kincaid, had unlocked Chloe's phone and was manually, systematically, deleting the audio backups from her cloud account. They were not just taking the phone. They were erasing the digital echo. They were wiping the history. But they were amateurs. They were sloppy. I knew this system. Deleting is not the same as erasing. They were in a panic. They were not thorough. I backed out of the log. I scanned the sidebar. And I found it. The one place a panicked amateur always forgets. Trash. I clicked the link. The screen refreshed. And there they were. The files. 4 of them, sitting in the digital purgatory, waiting for the system's 30-day automatic purge, or waiting for a user to click Empty Trash Now. I was in a race against that click. I moved the mouse. I clicked the checkbox next to Rec 021 Dawn, M4A, the most recent, the most important. I clicked Restore. The file vanished from the trash list. I heard footsteps, heavy, angry. Kincaid was walking toward me. "Mrs. Vance, you are not authorized." I clicked the next file. Restore. "Get away from that terminal, Riley." I clicked the third. Restore. He was close now, his shadow falling over the screen. I clicked the final file. Restore. A small green pop-up appeared. 4 items have been successfully restored to audio backups. I had them. I had the truth. Kincaid's heavy hand landed on my shoulder. Mrs. Vance, I told you, you are not authorized to be on that terminal. Step away, now. I didn't flinch. I slowly logged out of the cloud account. The green Restore Successful message burned into my mind. I had the files. Now. I just had to detonate them. I stood up slowly from the chair, turning to face him. I was no longer speaking to him as a detective. I was speaking to him as a criminal. And I spoke loudly. I did not yell, but my voice was clear, sharp, and projected to reach every corner of that station, including the ears of Officer Riley. I am restoring the felony evidence, detective, that you or your partner have been actively destroying for the last 10 minutes. Evidence of my daughter's assault. Kincaid's face went from angry to white. He understood the accusation, and he understood that I had made it public. Marcus, seeing his protector falter, went into a new kind of panic. The panic of a failed CEO. He jabbed a finger at me, his voice pitching high. She's hacking. That's my wife's private account. She's hacking it. That's illegal. Arrest her. Kincaid, arrest her. He was creating noise, a distraction, but his eyes were wild with terror. He was looking at the computer, then at Kincaid, then at me. He was watching his world end. Kincaid raised his hand, moving toward me. You are under arrest for... The main doors of the police station slid open with a quiet, pneumatic swoosh. The sound cut through the tension like a knife. Every head in the room mine. Kincaid's, Marcus's. Riley's snapped toward the entrance. A young woman stood there, silhouetted against the pre-dawn blue. She was in her early 20s, wearing a bright orange Denver Eats jacket and a baseball cap. She was clutching a thermal delivery bag to her chest like a shield. She looked terrified, and she looked cold. She scanned the room, her eyes wide, taking in the scene of a screaming man, an angry detective, and a woman in a wool coat over pajamas. She hesitated, clearly thinking this was a bad idea. Officer Riley, his voice shaky but gentle, broke the silence. Ma'am, can I help you? The young woman took a tentative step toward his desk. I'm sorry to bother. I'm here to make a report. I think... A report, Riley said, clearly grateful for the interruption. Yes, I was dropping off an order at the apartments on Fillmore. About an hour ago. She was twisting the strap of her bag. And I saw a man. Marcus, who had been ranting, went silent. What did you see, ma'am? Riley asked, pulling a form toward him. I saw a man, on a balcony. He was on the 3rd floor. He was screaming into a phone. He looked really, really angry. And then, he threw it. He threw the phone, Riley asked, his pen stopping. Yeah, the girl said. Like, threw it. He wound up and chucked it as hard as he could. Over the railing, I heard it hit the dumpster. When was this, ma'am? I asked, my voice quiet. The girl looked at me, then at Riley. It was a while ago. Maybe 45 minutes just before 3 a.m. My app. It logged the delivery at 2:58 a.m. This was just before that. And the dumpster? I pressed. Where was it? In the alley, she said. The big green one, behind the building. This was twist number 6. A bomb. Kincaid's lie. We have not located her phone. Was an obscenity. It wasn't at the scene. It wasn't missing. It was at the bottom of a dumpster, exactly where Marcus had thrown it before the police ever arrived. And then, the final, beautiful, terrible piece of the puzzle slammed into my brain. Twist number 7. The deletions. The girl said Marcus threw the phone 45 minutes ago, but the activity log I had just seen showed the deletions happening 10 minutes ago. Marcus threw the physical phone. He couldn't be the one deleting the files from the cloud. He didn't have the device. So who was it? Who had the phone's password? Who had a computer? Who had a vested interest, an investment, in making the evidence disappear? I slowly turned my head, not toward Marcus, but toward Detective Kincaid. He was not at the public terminal with me. He was standing at his own desk, next to Riley's. He was logged into his own police computer. The activity log on my screen had shown a login from the station's IP address. Marcus hadn't just given Kincaid his story. He had given him Chloe's password. And Detective Kincaid, on official police property, on a city-owned computer, had been sitting there, systematically committing a felony, tampering with evidence to protect his investment. He wasn't just a dirty cop. He was a co-conspirator. I didn't need all 4 files. I just needed the last one. I just needed the truth. I sat back down at the public terminal. My hands were perfectly steady. I navigated back to the audio backups folder. There they were, the 4 restored files, sitting pristine and safe. I looked at the last one, Rec 0211M4A. The timestamp matched the moments just before the 911 call. This was it. Kincaid was still standing over me, his face a purple mask of rage, his mind still processing the implications of the delivery girl. I told you to get away from that. You did, Detective, I said. And now I need you to listen. I had a pair of small earbuds in my coat pocket. I pulled them out and plugged them into the ancient terminal's headphone jack. I did not want to play this for the room. I just wanted it for myself, for the lawyer, for the case I was building. I double-clicked the file. Kincaid saw the motion. He saw me put an earbud in. He lunged. He was not thinking. He was a cornered animal, operating on pure, stupid instinct. He grabbed the headphone cord and ripped it from the jack. He thought he was stopping me. Instead, he had just made the audio revert to the computer's default. The speakers. The small, tinny, built-in speakers on the ancient public terminal. The file, already playing, now broadcast itself into the dead silence of the police station. The first sound was Chloe's voice, high and thin with terror. Let me go, Marcus. You're hurting me. It was not the voice of an attacker. It was the voice of prey. Marcus, who had been standing by the paramedic, froze. His skin, already pale, went the color of ash. Then, the other voice. Marcus's voice. But it was not the smooth, charming tech CEO. It was not the whimpering, terrified victim. It was a voice I had never heard. It was flat, cold, and filled with a bottomless reptilian cruelty. You're going to learn to shut up, his voice echoed, tinny and distorted, from the speakers. You're going to learn. You think your mom, that bitch investigator is going to save you. She can't save you. No one can. There was a sound, a heavy thud, and a sharp, pained gasp from Chloe. The delivery girl, who was still standing by the desk, put her hand over her mouth. Riley looked like he was going to be sick. Then Marcus's voice again, closer to the microphone, as if he was holding the phone, planning. Now, you listen to me, Chloe. This is what happens next. I'm going to call the police. I'm going to tell them you attacked me. I'm going to tell them you're crazy. You'll go to jail, or you'll go to a psych ward. It doesn't matter. And I'm taking everything. The apartment, the money, all of it. You're finished. Kincaid was staring at the computer, his mouth open, as if he could somehow force the sound back in. He had just become the star witness at his own destruction. And then, the final twist. Twist number 8. A new sound. A sharp, rhythmic scraping. Shing, shing, shing. It was unmistakable. It was the sound of a knife being run along a sharpening steel. Chloe's voice, a terrified whisper. What? What are you doing, Marcus? No. Marcus's voice, still calm. It just needs to be believable. There was a pause, a beat of terrible silence, and then a sharp intake of breath from Marcus, a low, controlled hiss. Ah, good. That's... Yes. Just enough. He was not screaming in pain. He was not defending himself. He was admiring his work. He had recorded himself cutting his own arm. The scraping sound stopped. There was a click, a sound of the knife being placed on a counter, and then Marcus's voice changed. The cold, cruel predator was gone, replaced by the shaky, terrified victim from the lobby. The actor was on stage. "Hello, hello, 911. His voice trembled, clear as a bell in the silent station. "Yes, my name is Marcus Thorne. My wife just attacked me with a knife. Please, send someone. I'm bleeding." The audio file ended. The only sound in the station was the low, electronic hum of the computer. No one moved. No one breathed. Kincaid was a statue of concrete. The delivery girl was crying silently. Riley looked at Kincaid with a new, dawning horror. And Marcus. Marcus was looking at the door, his eyes darting back and forth. He was a rat, and he had just heard the snap of the trap. The truth, all of it, was now hanging in the air, undeniable and complete. Marcus was a void. He stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. The blood drained from his face. He was a line of code that had just been erased. It was Kincaid who broke, the corrupt machinery grinding against the gears of reality. He looked at the computer, then at me, then at the new officer who had just entered. He was sputtering, desperate to regain control of a narrative that had just spectacularly exploded. "Turn it off!" he bellowed, lunging toward the desk. He pointed a thick, trembling finger at Officer Riley. "Riley, seize that computer. That terminal is evidence that's an order." But it was too late. The truth was out, and it had a witness. "That won't be necessary. Detective." The new voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. It sliced through Kincaid's panicked yelling and silenced the entire station. A man in a crisp white shirt and tie, his face tired but his eyes sharp, stood by the hallway entrance. He had clearly been standing there for the last critical minute. He had heard the self-inflicted wound. He had heard the fake 911 call. This was the shift captain, just arriving for his day. His eyes were not on me, or Marcus. They were locked on Kincaid, and they were filled with a cold, administrative disgust. "Kincaid," the captain said, his voice flat. "My office, now. Put your badge and your service weapon on my desk." Kincaid's face, which had been purple with rage, collapsed. The arrogance, the smug authority, it all evaporated, leaving just a large, pathetic man in a suit. "Sir, if you'll just let me explain, this woman—" "My office," the captain repeated, his voice dropping an octave. It was not a request. Kincaid, broken, turned and walked like a condemned man. The room was silent again, the immediate threat gone, but the architect of the lie was still here. I turned to the Denver Eats driver, who was still standing by the desk, her eyes wide. "Ma'am," I said, my voice quiet. "Thank you for stopping. I have one last question. The man you saw on the balcony, the one who threw the phone, do you see him in this room?" She looked at me, then at Riley, who gave her a short, sharp nod. She took a shaky breath and raised her arm. Her finger, small and certain, pointed directly at Marcus. "That's him," she said. "The one in the ripped shirt. That's the man." That was the last support, the last pillar holding up his fiction. In that second, Marcus Thorne understood that his investor was gone, his alibi was gone, his evidence was destroyed, and a new witness had just sealed his fate. He was no longer a tech genius. He was just a common, brutal liar exposed in a police station lobby. He made a sound, a low, animalistic growl that ripped from his chest. His head snapped, and his wild, hate-filled eyes found Chloe, who had heard the commotion and was now standing in the doorway of the interrogation room, pale and shaking. He did not scream at me. He screamed at her. "You!" he roared, his voice cracking. "You did this. You ruined me." He lunged. It was not a plan. It was the last, desperate, violent act of a cornered animal, lashing out at the person he could no longer control. He lunged at Chloe. I did not have time to think. I am 48 years old. I am an analyst, not a bodyguard. But I was in his way. I stepped directly between him and my daughter. I did not raise my hands to fight him. I did not flinch. I just stood there, an immovable object. I looked him dead in his eyes, letting him see the cold, absolute certainty that he would never, ever touch her again. He never made it. The spell was broken. Officer Riley, his face now a mask of cold resolve, finally seeing the true victim and the true perpetrator, was on him. Riley and another officer who had just run out from the back tackled Marcus mid-lunge, slamming him face first onto the dirty linoleum floor. The sound of his body hitting the ground was dull and final. The sharp, clean click of the handcuffs locking his wrists behind his back was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. He was screaming, incoherent, pathetic, as they hauled him to his feet, a string of curses and empty threats. I did not watch. I turned my back on the wreckage. I walked to Chloe, who was leaning against the doorframe, tears of shock and relief streaming silently down her face. She was watching the man she had loved being dragged away. I did not say, "It's over." I did not say, "I told you so." I simply, in the silence, unbuttoned my heavy wool coat. I slipped it off my shoulders and I wrapped it around her. I covered the torn silk blouse. I covered the bruises. I put my arm around her shaking shoulders. She collapsed against me, her head finding my shoulder, and for the first time that night, her body went limp. I did not look back at Kincaid's closed door. I did not look at the computer terminal where the truth had been resurrected. I just guided my daughter, my child, past the front desk, past the brave young woman in the orange jacket, and through the heavy glass doors of the station. We stepped out into the cold, clean air. The sun was just beginning to break over the Denver skyline, a thin, perfect line of orange. The long night was over. Thanks for listening to this story. We're a new channel and would love to hear from you. Comment below and let us know where in the world you're listening from. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us an extra boost by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.